Hello and welcome to our Equality Rep Network webinar, Equality, the Road Ahead. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. I'm really excited for what is ahead. The event has been organised through our Equality Rep Network, which is a collective of reps who meet on a quarterly basis to discuss equalities issues, share good practice and organise training. And we've managed to organise some really valuable training through that. We recently did training with Show Racism the Red Card. We've had training around employment law, equalities legislation. Reps have attended courses on hidden disabilities and mental health. So being a part of the Equality Rep Network, there's a real opportunity for reps to get additional training. If you would like to join the network, then please drop me an email. It should come up at the bottom of the screen now. My colleague will put a link in the comments section too. In a moment, I'm going to pop up a video that was put together for the STUC Congress last month. But first of all, I just want to take a couple of moments just to introduce our panel. So today we're going to be joined by Linda Somerville, who's the newly appointed STUC Deputy General Secretary for Policy, Political Liaison and Equalities. Linda is the former director of NUS Scotland, a former director of Equate Scotland, and prior to that has a long track record as a union organiser, shop steward and senior lay official. We also have Dr. Charmaine Blaise with us. Dr. Blaise works in healthcare, NHS Scotland, and is actively involved with UNISON. She's an accredited steward and equalities officer. Dr. Blaise is an education officer on the UNISON Scottish Black Members Committee, and in response to the pandemic has been involved with UNISON's partnership with BMIS, the Ethnic Minority National Resilience Network. Today, she's going to share some feedback on the BMIS UNISON experience. We also have Ismin Ali, who is the current chair of the STUC Black Workers Committee of GMB Scotland. And I'd also like to welcome Selma Augustad, who is the National Equality Officer for EIS. And then last but not least, we have Tom Queen. Tom is the branch secretary for Unite the Union, University of Glasgow branch. They're a shop steward and equality rep. Tom also sits on the executive committee member for Glasgow Trades Council and is a member of the STUC LGBT+ Workers Committee. So welcome, folks, and thanks for joining us. Before we bring our panelists onto the screen, I wanted to just play the equalities video that was shown at STUC Congress. Some of you may have seen it at this point, but I thought it would be quite a good video to show to frame some of our discussion today. So we'll just bring that up now.
So 2020's been a very strange year, to say the least.
As a young worker, this year has been probably one of the most difficult years.
So the year for me has been different.
It's been a very different year for me.
Been completely different.
Not only due to coronavirus, but due to the government's laws on zero-hour contracts.
With the coronavirus pandemic, all of the new rules, the lockdown, the changes in the way that we move around in public as well as in the workplace.
It's isolation from, regular contact, not just, community and socially, but just human contact.
The coronavirus is not just a health pandemic. It has illustrated so bluntly the inequalities that exist, especially for Scotland's Black and minority ethnic workers and communities.
One of my concerns is for younger women, that they will have to live with decades of inequality.
We've not been able to have that socialising aspect of our lives in which we come together and talk about issues within our workplace or even within our lives. So it's been very difficult.
People with protected characteristics have been given a really bad deal. Many people with protected characteristics are struggling to stay in work, to stay in full-time work. They're on zero-hour contracts.
A lot of LGBT+ people still suffer from family rejections. So for those who are maybe living at home with LGBT+ phobic parents, that can be difficult.
And then for furlough to happen, or for the large number of redundancies that have happened, this is pushing people into poverty, and we're not in a good situation here.
Equalities is really important because it drives so much of what happens in the world, and it affects literally every one of us some of us in so many different ways.
It's been stressful, it's been positive at the same time though, helping individuals who have to adjust to working from home. So it's been difficult, but it has been positive as well, and hopefully, you know, moving forward, the changes that have been achieved will be something that can continue even after we come out of lockdown to help, you know, our members and our workers.
I think it's been heartening to see so many online campaigns that have been getting carried out, as well as online meetings where young workers have the opportunity to come together and discuss ideas.
I'm concerned that equality is a soundbite and not actually acted upon.
There are things that need to be done. Equality impact assessments are essential in terms of figuring out what different needs different groups of people have, so that this can be taken into account when making new policies to help people. We can't have solution without talking to the people that they're going to affect. So that means that we need to be talking to as many people as possible from as many different backgrounds as possible.
There's a lack of data, there is inconsistency when employers in particular are applying risk assessments for Black and ethnic workers, and those are the things that we want to see really being tackled. We want greater consistency of practice in terms of risk assessments and protection and health and safety for workers, and we also want to see that data being collated and improved and how it's being analysed and used to inform policy and practice.
Inequalities are rising during the pandemic, and we don't want them to rise even more. The government needs to be held accountable, and by doing that, there should be a job guarantee scheme, especially for young people who are on these temporary contracts, so that people are in secure work and they can provide for themselves. As well, 0-hour contracts should be outright banned. It's a despicable practice that leaves people in an insecure life.
People are going to have fixed contracts. They know the hours they're working to meet with childcare provisions, because it's shown through this pandemic that women are key.
Equality impact assessments need to be carried out whenever anything changes. And while I know that this is an emergency situation, that does not mean that quality impact assessments shouldn't be done.
My one message to all governments everywhere is that we really need to go back in these tough times to our values, asking ourselves tough questions, and really finding our care for one another and for the people that we serve.
What I would like to say to the UK government is you need to reassess what you're spending your money on. You need to think about, is this money going to the right place? Is it doing what you think it's supposed to be doing? Because there's quite a lot of money being wasted on things that are not working. Stop throwing good money after bad money and switch it over to something that is going to work.
The key, though, is that there is support in place for those that are being impacted by these changes and these decisions that are being made. And that, as I say, is financial, to make sure that there's support there. And those that are unable to work in the current period have the financial support to keep them going.
If I could say one thing to the government, would be to support, to look at the bigger picture and see and look after women in society, because they have been at the forefront of this pandemic.
I think what we can do to help is, if you're not, and you are watching, you know, this message is join a trade union. The stronger we are together, the more hope we have of achieving what we need to achieve.
If you're already part of a union, is there a role that you can take to support your colleagues and the union in general?
I'm a women worker and I'm standing up for our rights.
I am a disabled worker and I am
an LGBT plus worker, and I'm standing up for our rights.
I'm a young worker and I'm standing up for our rights.
I'm a Black worker and I'm standing up for our rights.
We're Scotland's workers and together we are stronger.
Thanks very much, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. I encourage you to share it with your networks as well, if possible. I think the message that comes through from that, and one that resonates for all of us in the trade union movement, is that we're all in this together, and that doesn't just apply to when we're in a global pandemic. It means all the time we're all in this together. So I hope that through today's discussion, we will get more of an insight into some of the key issues that we can draw from and support as a movement. The topic of today's webinar is equality, the road ahead, as you know. So as we move from this year, a year which has laid to bear the kind of swathe of inequalities that are in our society, I'm hoping that we can find some direction, find some hope and look to the future. And I'd just like to remind folks as well, if you do have any questions and you want it to be answered by someone specific on the panel, then just, if you could just make that clear in your comment. So you can just ask a question through Facebook or YouTube comments. So before we go into the Q&A, we're going to hear 5 minutes from each of our panelists. So first of all, delighted to bring up Dr. Charmaine Blaise to speak first.
Thank you, Ewan, for introducing me. It's a pleasure and privilege to be here. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the globe. Before I continue, I just want to pay respects to all those who have gone before us, whose shoulders we stand on. Without them, we would not be here today. And also to remember everyone adversely affected by this pandemic, and to continue to honor and celebrate the courage, hard work, and commitment of all of us. So we are in December. It's that time of year for some of us, hibernating, resetting, reflecting, regenerating, and in many cultures, celebrating and gift giving. So speaking about gift giving, what's on your wish list for this year? I know many of us wished for a cure for COVID-19, and our wish has come true. And we really hope and pray that we would have a successful vaccination campaign. Well, my child, her wish list is a PlayStation 5 and a £500 gaming PC. But being serious, I would like to reflect on the work I have done with UNISON and BMS, and I would like to share an amalgamated list that I have compiled from my comrades over the course of these few months. So what's on our wish list? We wish everyone happy Human Rights Day. Today, December 10th, honors the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we know human rights allow all people to live with dignity, freedom, equality, justice, and peace. And every person has these rights simply because they are human beings. We wish for the end of gender-based violence, as today marks the end of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, an international campaign to challenge violence against women and girls. We wish for trusted sources of information to debunk myths and conspiracy theories about COVID-19 vaccines so that everyone can make an informed choice and decision. We also wish that important messages are communicated in audio-visual format using plain, simple language or dialects that are spoken on a daily basis by people from our different communities. We wish that we no longer have to keep discussing the same points about communication of messages to death or ad nauseum, as has been for many years with different local and national bodies. We wish for better data, for data equity, and that Scotland adheres to the 14 ethnic categories under the Equality Act 2010, and to be mindful that minorities of minorities, like myself as African Caribbean, stats mean nothing to us, as data or stats of our communities are near non-existent. We wish that migrants are referred to as New Scots, and we are seen as part of the Scottish community as citizens, and that we celebrate the social, economic, and cultural impact New Scots bring to Scotland. We wish that we can abolish no recourse to public funds. We wish that the Minority Resilience Network continues, and we keep new ways of meeting because we have maximum participation. We wish for increased diversity in the Scottish Parliament, and that there are more women from African, Asian, and minority groups in Scottish politics. We also wish that our children can be educated in an environment free from prejudice, discrimination, and racism, and that politically there is greater representation of young children and young people's concerns. We wish that this statement by Professor Kehinde Andrews is untrue. He said the cycle of protest, report, recommendation, inaction is a feature of the equalities industrial complex whose sole purpose is to maintain a racist status quo. Wash, rinse, repeat, in order to keep up appearances while upholding inequality. So my final wish, in the spirit of Human Rights Day, I wish that we continue to take action in our own daily lives to uphold the rights that protect us all and therefore promote the kinship of all human beings. So what's on your wish list? Thank you, and season's greetings, happy holidays, and have a better 2021.
Thanks so much for that, Charmaine. That was really, really inspiring. And thank you so much as well for honouring the Human Rights Day today. So next up, we're going to bring on Tom Queen from Unite the Union.
Thanks very much, Ian. Yes, happy Human Rights Day and solidarity to all fellow workers. It's a real pleasure to be here and to follow Charmaine. So as Ewan says, I'm Tom Queen. Use they them pronouns. I'm branch secretary of Unite at Glasgow Uni, where I'm a teaching lab technician in physics and astronomy. I also sit on the STUC's LGBT Workers Committee from Glasgow Trades Council. So I'm going to talk a bit about what we've been doing within Unite at Glasgow. So a bit of background, I became a union rep 6 years ago, about a year after I joined the union. I wasn't hugely aware of what unions did when I first started working, but once I learned more about the history of unions and how they've historically fought for equality for the working class, it felt like an obvious thing to support, join and get active in. And I've taken a lot of what I've done in the past 5 years from the STUC and its campaigns. For example, learning at Congress a couple of years back from a delegate from the Women's Committee about the sheer lack of provisions for menopausal workers, I began campaigning on that at work, even though it's not something that will affect me personally, because I know it would impact half of our membership at some point or another. This was particularly prescient as just at that time, menopause was used successfully under the Equality Act as something that was protected under disability as a long-term health condition. So whether or not any particular worker would consider it a disability, that gave us a huge amount of legal backing to ensure that proper adjustments would be in place and the stigma could be tackled. More recently, I've led on a campaign to get reasonable adjustment passports implemented in the workplace. So what these are is if you're a disabled worker with reasonable adjustments, but your role or your line management changes, you don't need to renegotiate your adjustments. They're just carried over in this passport as a starting point, and any changes that need to be made to fit the new role can start from there rather than having to go right back to the beginning, which can be an incredibly stressful time for the workers. And this is something that I learned about and discussed with a member of the STUC's Disabled Workers Committee. I believe that's all being approved this week. I'm currently on annual leave, so I'll need to confirm it, but hopefully when I get back, I'll find that it's been approved and it can start making a real difference to some of our members. I also sit on the university's mental health working group as the joint trade union delegate. As a worker with a history of anxiety, it meant a lot to me that we as unions be involved in policy making from this side. And having seen the effects of mental health at work, from the impacts during restructurings, the processes of grievances, the impact of marketisation on the sector, years of pay restraint, and the looming rise of mental health amongst our students, it was imperative that we get something done. So I began organising sessions for training mental health first aiders through Unite after I went on a course for reps originally. This was approved by management. Members got 2 days off to study for that. And mysteriously, just a couple of days after we announced this, the university announced it was also going to be doing the same thing. I mean, I'm happy for them to get the credit for our idea, I suppose, as it means we now have just under 300 trained mental health first aiders on campus. You know, it's a good end, but we got there first. We've done other things, such as getting more paid leave for carers, changing our disciplinary and attendance management processes to be more person-focused and significantly less punitive. For example, managers now have to demonstrate that they've actually put in the effort at every stage to help their employees rather than just saying, no, you're out. And funnily enough, this led to a decrease in cases which were blatant bullying but hard to prove. There's a lot more I could talk about. I haven't even touched on the work I've been trying to get involved with as a queer activist within the STUC, within the workplace, within the Scottish Greens, within the local LGBT+ community. But I'll wind up here and just say that it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to speak alongside my comrades from these other unions. And thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much for that, Tom. I think it was great to see you highlight kind of how you got into the trade union movement in the first place, but also the importance of standing up for our collective rights as opposed to just your rights when they're threatened. So next up, we want to hear from Selma from EIS.
Thanks, Ewan, and thanks to Ewan and the STUC for the invitation to speak here today. As Ewan said in the introduction, my name is Selma Augestad. I'm the National Officer for Equality at the Educational Institute of Scotland. That is Scotland's largest teaching union, representing over 80% of the profession with 60,000 members. So as most of us now begin to imagine going back to the workplace, most educators never left the classroom in the first place and have dealt with the momentous challenge of continuing to deliver education with little to no protection and prevailing under prioritization of their safety. The STUC equality video that we watched at the beginning really highlights many of the inequalities that have been drawing attention during this pandemic. And it's important to remember that a pandemic does not in itself cause inequality, but in any crisis, we know that it is marginalized groups who bear the brunt, and hard-fought advances for equality are now again at risk of being lost. The risks associated with the pandemic and lockdown measures are unequally distributed and unacceptably disproportionate for people with disabilities, for women, for people of colour or BAME people, for LGBT people, for those experiencing domestic abuse, and for other marginalised and minoritized groups. Acknowledging this disproportionate risk facing some groups of members, the EIS have provided bespoke guidance for members who are pregnant, those previously shielding, as well as tailored risk assessments and advice for BAME members. These groups must also be prioritised in return and rebuilding in the year to come. So I would like to just highlight a few areas of equality work that the EIS are focusing on at the moment and what lessons I can draw from these that I think would be beneficial to keep in mind for the road ahead for equalities. So it has been well documented that women are overrepresented on the front line of this pandemic in caring and in teaching professions and are facing a disproportionate burden also in the home due to lockdown and prevailing unequal gender divisions of unpaid labour. It is so important that we highlight not only the inequality of this, but also the resilience and document women's contributions to history as it happens. The EIS will shortly be beginning a project to spotlight our member stories during this time. During 16 days of activism, which ends today with Human Rights Day, we've been speaking to gender-based violence experts about how our members can take action. We know that there is increased risk during lockdown due to isolation, but COVID-19 did not cause gender inequality, and women and children are at risk every day of the year. We must take this forward next year, ensure that flexible working is the norm, that there are domestic abuse policies in place that are competent, and that safety, mental health and well-being is understood as an employer's responsibility and their duty of care. In the road ahead, we should go further in ensuring that there is lived experience at the centre of our efforts. Having dedicated networks of groups who are underrepresented in the membership can be a crucial tool in ensuring that their voices are heard within the union and remove any barriers that may exist, which are so often invisible to others. The EIS will soon be hosting an online networking event for disabled members and members who have access or communication difficulties to find out what support they may need going forward and to facilitate their networking. This year, we've also worked alongside a Glasgow local association network for BAME teachers to set up an online national BAME network. This informal network will be used as a discussion forum, supportive space, and a conduit for training opportunities, with the aim to reduce isolation in areas of the country where BAME educators are few and far between. And during the reinvigoration that we saw for Black Lives Matter over the summer, we developed an anti-racist strategy in order to organize our efforts and sustain that mobilization that we saw of people coming together to make a difference. The strategy involves 3 steps that are captured here in our posters, and I'll just share these briefly with you. So our first poster is raising awareness that racism is real, it is still here. That we must stand together and take action for race equality, that we are stronger together. And that we should all start by making a small step for a big change. These steps of awareness raising, joining together and organizing to then take action are steps that I encourage both on an individual, a personal level in our communities and nationally. So we've been hosting all member webinars to explore Black Lives Matter and effective allyship. And we were also successful in securing Scottish Union learning funding for anti-racist leadership learning across union representatives, school leaders and BAME educators. The learning is provided nationally in partnership with the Scottish Association of Minority Ethnic Educators and includes concrete steps for these groups to link together to take local action upon completion. We are also updating our website to make equality learning and opportunities more engaging and more easily accessible. This year has certainly shown a harsh light on some of the ways in which we still have a long way to go to achieve equality for all. And as trade unionists, we must take those lessons with us. We have to ensure that equality issues are not an add-on to the main agenda of recovery, but integrated throughout. So how do I see the road ahead for equality work? I see a mountain laid bare with the issues more broadly exposed, but it cannot be chipped away unless we all get involved for liberation for all. Next year, as we see Brexit trade deals or not looming with the grave consequences for immigration and disability equality, and an attempt to return to normal, I think it's crucial that our efforts deepen and that equality is at the centre. Equality reps will be crucial to this. So the lessons or suggestions here for the next year, I suppose, are to raise awareness, access learning opportunities. There are so many at the moment online, embed lived experience and facilitate meaningful voice within your workplace and within the union structures without placing the full burden of representation for equality issues on the most marginalised, but also link in with expert organisations to give advice and to ensure that equality impacts are well understood and considered in any mainstream union activities. Okay, I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much for that, Selma. I was lucky enough to be involved with the EIS leadership training around anti-racism this year. And I think it was really great in the sense that it's not just providing next steps, but it's providing practical steps for people to take as well. So next we're going to hear from Usman Ali. So, thanks, Usman.
Thank you very much, Ewan, and hello, everybody. This has been certainly a very busy week, as many weeks in 2020 have been for myself and members of the STUC Black Workers Committee. So just yesterday, I took part in radio media interviews about the launch of a report from our brothers and sisters at the TUC, who have just this morning launched a report that's highlighted that 1 in 3 BME workers have had to self-isolate during the coronavirus pandemic. That's 35% compared to 24% of white workers. And more than that, the report has highlighted that BAME workers feel more unsafe at work, that they feel higher stress levels at work, and that they continue to receive unfair treatment at work. And this kind of reminds us of the Fair Work principles of respect, of equality, of opportunity, of fulfilment, and of effective voice. And, you know, those principles and commitments that the Scottish Government introduced just 5 years ago, and with the ambition that by 2025, 5 years from now, that they will be the driving force for everything that we do in society and workplaces here in Scotland. But unfortunately, the evidence that, you know, shows, and the evidence certainly that we as a committee have been collating here at the STUC, has shown that Fair Work is not working. It's not living up to what was those hopes 5 years ago, and that more action, radical action, needs to be taken quite quickly if we are to meet that target within that 5-year time period. And so we're working with the Scottish Government to develop a Fair Work statement on race. And I also led a delegation of actual BAME workers, some of those I know are joining us today in the audience, to go into government and to give them first-hand feedback. So they're not just hearing from gatekeepers and representative bodies from across the trade union movement. They, as workers, as BAME workers here in Scotland, are abled and enabled and empowered to go in and represent themselves and to voice their own and have that effective voice heard at the heart of government and at the heart of power. Another thing that I've been very busy this week doing is I've been meeting the Scottish Government's Race Equality Action Plan Programme Board to update them about our Break the Race Ceiling campaign. This campaign by the STUC Black Workers Committee has audited 150 public sector employers since June, and in the first 3 months of our campaign, 41 of those public sector employers have responded. You can find all the detail on our Facebook page, of course, and if you just Google, you'll see some media articles relating to it. But in the 41 responses, is basically telling us what we've asked them is, can those organisations tell us the numbers of BAME workers that they have in their workforce, how many have left their workforce over the past 5 years, and how many are employed in senior and strategic roles. But we've also asked them to outline the routes that they use to understand BAME people, be it their workforce or be it communities that they serve, how they recruit from the BAME communities, how they retain their BAME workforce, and how they give confidence and upskill their BAME workforce to go into those senior and strategic roles as part of career progression. And so we know that there are just 2,000 that have been recorded so far in terms of those numbers, and we are wanting as an SGC to really try and publish these findings as quickly as possible, but also try and push those that are still to respond. And with the help of the Scottish Government, and there has been senior representation from within government being made to try and get the remaining public sector employers to respond to us, because it's been recognised by government and others that the data that we are holding as part of this campaign is really enriching, it's really useful, and if we want to really break that race ceiling, we need to be able to speak quite openly about what we've got, and help inform practice. And that's what we're doing with some of employers. So Police Scotland, for example, have set up a Break the Race Ceiling steering group, and I've helped them with some of the kind of documentation. We've produced a Break the Race Ceiling simulator that is their steering group and subgroups are using that to inform the work they're doing. Hopefully the NHS, the health and social care, I'm having some discussions with senior colleagues there as well about how we can do likewise. So so much has been done, so much more still to do, and I look forward to your questions and working with you all. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Isman. It's always great to have you on these panels. So next we'll bring in Linda Somerville.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me here today. As Ewan says, I've only just started at the STUC 2 weeks ago, so I'm just delighted to already be here and take part in today's session on equalities. And thanks to everyone for taking up the time to attend. I know it's an extra thing on top of all the other work that you do, so I'm grateful that there's so many people here. I do have a background working in equalities, and I was a workplace rep for many, many years, working on individual problems, whether that was maternity related or harassment or discrimination in the workplace. And also both helping individuals, as you all do, but also collectively negotiating whether it's flexible working policies, absence management policies, all of these things. And I know how hard it is as equality reps to get some employers and some managers to take equality seriously. For 5 years, I was director at Equate Scotland, where I worked to increase the participation of women in science, engineering and technology, some of our key economic sectors in Scotland, where women are at many levels invisible and at some levels barely recognisable. Women often leave these industries in large numbers after trying them out because the workplace just doesn't work for them in many of these industries. And more recently, I was a director at the National Union of Students in Scotland. I have no previous experience of working with student unions, as my background was always in trade unions. But I was really, one of the reasons I went to work for NUS for a while was because of their interest in campaigning, my interest in their campaigns around equalities that they call liberation campaigns. And I always think it's really interesting that so many young people, not all students are young, but so many young people that are activists have used the word of liberation and reclaimed that as we look forward. And I also think it's important as well that to recognise the education around equalities. And while sometimes we think that we've come quite far, there's still so much more to learn. And I know working with lots of the elected student leaders around equalities, I learned from them. I learned lots of things that I think that also the trade union and the workplace, we still have got some learning to do, particularly as we look at the future of equalities and the struggles there will be, thinking of things around gender-based violence, trans rights, intersectionality, just to name a few, some of the issues that all seem a bit new to many managers, to parts of the workplace, and indeed to some parts of our trade unions. Now, the STUC's got a long and proud history of campaigning for equality. And currently, our equality committees are working really hard on a huge range of issues, far too many to mention. But a couple of them are the work that they've been doing on Islamophobia, disability pay gap, mental health, abortion rights, and hate crime. And some of these issues will actually affect day-to-day members in your workplace as well. And I want to pay tribute to everyone and thank the members of the STUC equality committees, because like all of you, they're putting in those extra hours and commitment on behalf of others. And they're doing some really excellent work. Now, while the pandemic has given some people the chance to reflect and to make positive changes in their lives and potentially their work, for many workers, especially those with protected characteristics, COVID has only further exacerbated and exposed the challenges, barriers, and discrimination that they face. And when we look at the future of equalities, we need to look at the future of work. And it's difficult for reps who this year, more than ever, are firefighting day to day for members. But we do need them to look ahead and to ask, what will the workplace look like in the future? What will your workplace look like post-COVID? Will working from home continue, if that even has been something that's there in your workplace? How will the use of technology change your workplace? Have people been working more flexibility, or has the flexibility all been on the employer's side? And it's so important that equality reps are part of these discussions and can help shape solutions that are fair and equitable for workers in the future. Because while we celebrate Human Rights Day, I am reminded of an event I went to years ago on human rights, where a working class woman in the audience stuck her hand up and said, "What good are my human rights? Can I get them from the shop in the local high street?" And it's true, as we know about all kinds of legalised rights, they are only any good to us when we actually have the power to access them and use them. And we know that that means in the trade union movement about organising collectively. So for next year, I would ask you to continue with the great work that you are doing on equalities. Make sure that equalities is at the heart and the forefront of all the decisions made within trade unions, and get involved in your own equality networks, this one importantly, and also in those with the STUC. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Linda, for your contribution there, and thank you to everybody who's contributed today. I'm conscious of the time, so I'd like to move on to the Q&A. I can see some questions are coming in our comment section, so I'll bring everybody onto screen now so we can address some of the questions. So the first question that we've got is, what can be done to reduce gatekeeping within the trade union movement? How can we challenge racism, homophobia, etc. within our movement? If we go to Charmaine first.
Yes, I would address the point around challenging racism and homophobia within our environment. There's a phrase that people say, there's an anatomy of discrimination, and the things that someone would face as a Black worker, the racism would face someone in our LGBT community would face. And a big part of it is education. We need to educate ourselves and people around us. When we are educated, we have a more open viewpoint. And also we need to have a bit of empathy and love for each other. And also to challenge racism, standing up, not staying quiet. When things are being done to your pal, not staying quiet when things are happening. Instead of tweeting, you could tweet, yes, but when it comes to standing up with someone, do you stand by that person who is being abused, racially abused, or experiencing homophobia? So it's actually individual action, and it makes collective action as well.
Thanks for that, Charmaine. Salma, would you want to comment on the point of what can be done to reduce gatekeeping within the trade union movement?
Sure. I think this is a really good question, and I agree that education, definitely what Charmaine said, is so crucial to ensure that people feel really confident when issues of racism and homophobia is brought up to them, and that they know how to respond, because I think there is a lot of anxiety around getting it wrong, and we really want to make sure that people feel empowered to at least try and to do that in a way that's competent. Also, some of the work that we've been doing is to facilitate and grow the voice of underrepresented groups within the union, and I think that's another really important thing, is if there is spaces to empower people who are underrepresented from underrepresented groups, that can be a helpful conduit to make sure that their voices and perspectives are stronger, so that there really is no option to ignore claims of racism, homophobia, or any other equality issue, but their voice is stronger as well.
Thanks for that, Selma. We'll move to the next question now. We've got another one coming in. In Unite, there is no visible online BAME networks at present. Is there a reason for this, and is there plans to change it? Usman, I don't know if you want to comment on this.
Is my microphone unmuted? Sorry, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, I'm not speaking on behalf of Unite the Union. I'm not a member of Unite the Union, but I am speaking as chair of the STUC Black Workers Committee. So I'm aware that, like many unions, there are networks. They are particularly targeted, for example, at Black and minority ethnic members. I note the premise of the question, though, it's a visible online platform. Some unions have taken on innovation and come into the third decade of the 21st century more than others, and for others there's a bit more work to be done. But certainly I'd like to just if I can, just bring this question back into the one that we've just heard on gatekeeping, and set a challenge for the Scottish trade union movement in two parts. One, to trade union leaders, so to our general and regional secretaries, to our reps, to those that represent the structure within trade union, to try and review your processes and your systems and make sure it's more inclusive and encouraging and encourage. Just because you may not have people of different protected characteristic doesn't mean they're not there. Go out and look for them and bring them in. And to those trade union members and still to become members in workplaces, please do join a trade union and become active. And when the next STUC Black Workers Committee conference is held, hopefully in October 2021, be it physically or virtually, I want it to have the most amount of applications to it to become delegates. And so I want to set out this challenge to both the trade union movement and to our membership as a whole. Thanks.
Thanks. We'll move to the next question now. It's around working from home. So working from home has been a challenge and an opportunity for many recently. What do you see as the challenges going forward for workers working from home in terms of equalities? We'll go to Linda for this question.
Thanks. I mean, for many workers, particularly a lot of disabled workers I've spoken to, the travel and the barriers and the difficulties in travel, some workers have actually taken that as a positive out of this situation. But for many workers, actually workers who are living alone and some workers who already have anxiety or mental health issues, the increased isolation and the lack of contact with people has made life actually much more difficult. So the idea that people working from home have all been having a great time is certainly not true. And it's affected different groups of workers in different ways, particularly those with health conditions and those that have been shielding anyway, who have had even more increased isolation. So I think around working from home, the issues that we need to look at in the future is about the flexibility, as I mentioned. Some workers have said that they would like to continue some of the working from home, but I think it needs to be on terms that are negotiated collectively, because we're already seeing employers making some decisions around home working that it will continue for them simply as a cost-cutting exercise. So we need to make sure that when we have the discussions around what the future of the workplace looks like, as I said earlier, equalities have to be at the absolute centre of that.
Thanks, Linda. Tom, would you want to come in here as well?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that really got me during the first weeks of the pandemic was just so easily so many people were able to begin that transition to working from home. I say that after having spent many, many months on individual member cases being denied working from home or indeed any form of flexible working as was their legal right. Basically, it seemed that as soon as abled workers needed it, all the barriers were removed. So clearly those barriers didn't need to exist in the first place. All I can suggest really is that the genie's been let out of the bottle. It should not and cannot be put back in. We need to make sure that we don't allow these fake barriers to be put back, and allowing those who want to work from home to do so in a safe and risk-assessed manner, but also bearing in mind that there are going to be those who want and need that distinction between their workplace and their home, which obviously will affect different people differently.
Thanks for that, Tom. We'll move to the next question now. We've still got a few to get to, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. So the next question is around what we can do internally as a trade union movement to walk the walk on equalities. So what is our one issue or priority action on equality? So we'll go to Usman first for this question.
So thanks. I want to address the question directly. Peter, thank you for your question. I don't think it's as simple as just saying let's just have one action that we can all then just focus on and make it happen. Equalities is very complex. It involves a lot of people. And even at that, it's not just the 9 protected characteristics. As chair of the STUC Black Workers Committee, I hear a lot, BME, BAME, 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 in many meetings. And I actually question people, do you actually understand who you're actually talking about when you say that. Do you know it's not just one group of people? It is actually, under the Equalities Act, 14 different communities that make up Black and minority ethnic, that category that people often float about. And each of them have their unique needs and experiences, and each of those things need to be addressed quite rightly if we are to get equality and racial equality in Scotland once and for all. But that one point, Peter, that you also raised later, which is around the project that the STUC did a few years ago in trying to gather the data stats and things. My understanding is that the challenges there was the low response rate from some affiliates, and that's why I've, for example, earlier set out that challenge. But I think there's another challenge, which is for all of us as equality reps and people working in the equality space to really go to our affiliates and challenge them. If they are not responding, my committee, for example, has sent out interactive surveys and exercises that we want feedback on, and we keep getting low responses. So I ask all of you to join with us, and this is kind of going into maybe your one action, which is if everybody can get together, go to your affiliates and hold them to account. Have you, as affiliates, responded to the STUC survey or request? If you have, great. If you haven't, can you explain why not? And then hopefully get some action from there.
Thanks, Usman. Linda, I'm wondering whether you'd want to come in this point just around is there any kind of priority actions around equality for the trade union movement as a whole that you think might get more focus in the year ahead?
I think it's difficult to choose one thing because, whether you were to look at any issue that's an industrial issue, whether it's around pay, any part of terms and conditions, you will find a whole layering of inequality within those things. So we'll all have within our different sectors and our different workplaces, different layering of different inequalities. I think what's important though is that equalities has often been a sideline sometimes within the trade union movement, and certainly in workplaces amongst employers. And I think the one thing that we need to do, and today is part of that, and is beginning to say that this needs to be not mainstreamed in a way that therefore it's often mainstreamed and forgotten about, but actually at the centre of the work that we do. And all too often it's left to the same people to raise the same subjects, and that's tiring, and it's actually everyone's responsibility. So I think that's what our role, that's what my role is, and I think that's what other people's role should be, is to try and make sure that people are accountable for the work that they do within the trade union movement, and that therefore that has to fit within the framework of equalities that we all believe in. And specifically on Peter's point about data for the STUC, I'll find out about that. As I say, I'll make an action to do that and get back to Peter.
Thanks, Linda. I think we've got time for one more question. So the last question is, what can we do to put the issue of facility time for equality reps near to the top of our agenda? So this is it's a big issue for equality reps. They don't have facility time. It's not something they were guaranteed in the Equality Act 2010. It continues to be an issue. Unfortunately, this lies with Westminster, the legislation around this. So it could be a tricky thing to change, but obviously employers should be encouraged to bring this in with any agreements made with the union. So we'll go with Selma, because I know that you mentioned you work with equality reps. What can be done to put the issue of facility time back at the top of the agenda?
So we have just set up an EIS equality rep network, and it's become very clear that some equality reps do have facility time through locally negotiated agreements and some don't. And I think that is quite useful information, because then we can use that, the equality reps who don't have that agreement can say, look, this is what they're able to do in another local authority area perhaps, and these are the impacts that we're able to achieve through that. So I think it's useful to not accept that that's a default, even though there is no, rights inherent to have facility time, to not accept it, to make sure that mainstream reps also see the value and importance of having dedicated equality reps that have the time to dedicate to those issues, that is an added value. And especially now, I think we have an opportunity when there is so much more awareness of the equality impacts of COVID and in the return to work, to make that case locally when we discuss how to bring people back into workplaces.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really good point there. And I know certainly through our Equality Rep network, you do have reps who do have facility time. And I think a lot of it is as well is about disseminating the information and these success stories, because there are success stories, and if we can pull from these and kind of get that across the board, then I think we're onto the right path. Charmaine, would you want to comment on that point as well?
Yeah, I think it's like, as you said, it's like each one teach one, and sharing that learning, also negotiating and showing that it's a win-win. It's about making the workplace better for employees, and then therefore it's a better work experience. They're able to contribute when they come to work in a meaningful way. And it links back to the fair working practice. So I think part of it is really, a big part of it is what is successful, sharing it widely. Because many times we have successes and we keep it within a small sphere or small environment. And so you have other people struggling to achieve the same thing that you have achieved. So it's important to continue networking, the Equality Reps network, sharing our successes and even our failures, because we learn what not to do or an approach that we need to not take. So I think a big part of it is us just really working together and collaborating.
Thanks, Charmaine. We'll take one last point from Usman on that question before we'll have to wrap up. Usman? You're on mute.
Oh. Sorry, I need to always wait a bit. Very briefly, Ewan, this question is exactly what fair work is meant to be resolving, and it's the fact that we're still 5 years on talking about this very issue and trying to get facility time just shows how fair work is not working, and it needs to be challenged. And fair work is a Scottish government devolved thing. I get the whole thing about legislation, and we will target Westminster as well, but we've got to recognise that in Scotland we can actually act on this as well.
Thanks very much. I think that'll bring us to the end of the questions for today. I'll try and take some of the questions that we didn't get round to answering and see if I can put together a response for them. As I mentioned at the start, if you do want to get involved with the Equality Rep Network, we meet on a quarterly basis, and my email is just at the bottom of the screen there, so feel free to drop me an email. But yeah, thanks very much for joining, everybody, and thanks to you as well. Cheers.
Okay, bye. Cheers.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.